Okay, thanks and welcome to today's day 4 of the IMA for Beginners webinar series. Today we're going to be discussing maintenance in IMA, and we're going to look at a lot of specific different types of maintenance that you may need to do on your items once they've become operational in our system. So I am recording today's webinar, and I'll send out the link later today. I already sent out the PowerPoint. If anyone's missing that, you can just let me know, and I'll be sure to send that out to you as well. So if you can hear me and you can see the presentation, please respond to the following question. Which maintenance task do you struggle with the most? So maintenance tasks would be the types of tasks you do on operational items, items that have already been completed through the new item setup. And maybe they've already had orders, maybe they haven't, but they've already been through the new item setup. So which maintenance task do you struggle with the most? And again, when you're using the chat, please send it to all participants. I don't get it when you send it to just the presenter because I'm in presenting mode. When I finish the webinar, I end up finding quite a few that were just sent directly to the presenter. So be sure you are sending it to all participants. I'll come back to this in just a few slides. As a reminder, I know we had a few instances yesterday where someone kept leaving their microphone open, and it was contributing to a lot of background noise. So if you could please put your phone on mute when you're not speaking, and if you are listening to the audio from your computer instead of calling in, please be sure to mute your computer's microphone. You can do that by going to Control Panel, Sound, and Recording tab. And I will have several points through the presentation with the blue bubble graphic with the question mark for questions. Feel free to ask questions audibly at that time. You're not just stuck to using the chat. It's just if you could just keep them to those specific slides, that helps us make sure that we get through all the material. But please don't be afraid to speak up and ask any questions audibly as well. And feel free to submit questions at any time using the chat. Again, make sure that you send it to all participants and not just the presenter. So I did ask what maintenance tasks do you struggle with the most. And it looks like even from some of the earlier sessions we've had this week, it looks like a lot of the people with this month's webinar series are pretty new and haven't had a lot of experience in IMA yet, which is totally fine, and this is the perfect place for you to be. So a couple of the responses we have kind of reinforce that they're new and they haven't really done any maintenance. So it's good to know. It is a lot of information, so it might be good to keep the video link on hand so in the future when you come back to actually having to do one of those tasks, you can quickly pull it up and see that specific task as a refresher. If I'm not able to answer your question, or if it gets lost in the chat, let's say you do send it to the presenter and I never see it until everyone's signed off, feel free to email vendoruniversity@searshca.com and I will do my best to try to find an answer to your question. Again, if you're just joining us, I'm Mona. I'm the Instructional Design and Training Manager for Vendor and the Item Support team. On Monday, I asked you to watch the video for day 1 for IMA Basics and Terminology. Day 2, we went over setting up new items in the new item grid. And day 3, yesterday, we talked about some different IMA features like the changes grid and some of your different task lists that you have. Today, we are going to be talking more about maintenance. So some of the questions we get a lot from vendors would be, how do I add a new carton to an existing item or change a carton configuration? How do I add a new vendor pack to an existing item or duplicate an existing vendor pack? How do I add new ship points to an existing order DUNS, or how do I update the ship points to an item or assign different ship points to different DCs? And then also, how do I update the dimensions? And we're going to go over all of these today. So that's going to include UPC changes, carton configuration changes, new cartons, new vendor packs, ship point changes, and dimensions and weights changes. First up is UPC changes. So my item is operational with the incorrect UPC. How do I fix it? It really depends on your buyer or your merchant. If they require the same KSN to be used, then inventory actually has to strip the UPC off of the existing KSN and then put the correct UPC back onto that KSN. So there's actually nothing for you to do if the buyer wants to keep the same KSN. And some of the reasons they might want to do that might be for reporting purposes, so that they can be consistent with that KSN. Now, if the buyer doesn't care about maintaining that same KSN, then you can just sync over a new carton with your data sync provider. This can often be, it may be a much quicker way to get that UPC corrected, especially if inventory is backlogged with different tasks that they have to do. They may not be able to get to it immediately. So if they don't require the same KSN, then we do recommend that you sync over a new carton with your data sync provider. So any questions about changing UPCs on operational items? Okay, we'll move on to carton configuration changes then. So there are several reasons that you might need to update carton configurations. It could be that your original carton setup is incorrect. Maybe it got set up in the system and you just missed the configuration, or maybe there was some miscommunication between you and the merchant team and you thought that they wanted a different configuration than how you set it up. Another reason might be that they want an additional carton assortment options. So maybe it wasn't ever wrong, the one that you set it up, but they want just another option to be able to order. That would be another reason why you might need to update carton configurations. The process is different depending on whether it's an in-process item or an operational item. If the item's in process, and the original carton setup is not correct, this can actually be corrected on the grid in the vendor role. So if you haven't approved it yet, then it's really easy because you can just do it whenever you put those items on a grid to complete the new item setup. And if it has been approved through your role but it's not yet operational, you can just ask for your merchant or inventory analyst to return those items to the vendor role. And then you can go back to they'll show up in your returned items task list, and you can put them on a grid from your returned items task list and update that carton configuration and then reapprove it. Now, if the items are already operational, you cannot change carton configurations typically on existing items. If you need to update that carton configuration, then you would sync over a new carton with the correct configuration. So I'm just going to show you a quick demo on how to update it for an in-process item. So here I'm in my grid history, and I'm searching for grids under my ID. So here's my active grid. So I'm going to click the grid button to go into that new item grid. And the default view that comes up is the empty required fields. So you will not see your package configuration in this view because it was completed when you synced it over. There is already a package configuration after you synced it. So you have to go find it on the tab that it's located on. If you remember from day one, the carton configuration is going to be located on your Packages tab. So if you click Packages tab here at the top, here you can see the member quantity field. That's your package configuration. So we can see that the total configuration for this carton is 6, and we can see each of these UPCs have 2. So let's say that that's wrong, that each of those UPCs should have actually had 3. Then you can just update that, and it'll automatically update your carton configuration as well. And then you would just go back to empty required and finish completing all of your empty required fields and approve it through. So any questions about updating carton configurations? Okay, we're going to move on to new cartons then. There are several reasons why you might need new cartons. It could be because one of the things we just discussed, that you have a change in a carton configuration. It could be that a new vendor is going to be supplying an existing item, or maybe you have promotional displays. Just always remember, a new carton also has to have a new vendor pack. If it doesn't have a vendor pack, it's not going to be able to be ordered. The most common errors that you'll encounter when adding a new carton is that the UPCs match the incorrect quantity, the carton dimensions do not align with each's, or vendor packs were not created for the new exploding assortment members. So if you need to create a new carton that's going to have an additional each, sometimes those eaches have to have vendor packs created for them in addition to the cartons having new vendor packs created for them. And you will encounter a hard error if you did not create one and it is required. So you won't be able to approve it through your role. It's not going to go get set up incorrectly, it just won't approve. So it'll give you a hard error and you'll know that you need to have to go back and do that vendor pack. So the process for creating new cartons depend on the type of cartons that you are creating. If you are doing each packages, each cartons, uniform cartons, and exploding assortment cartons, those should be synced over from your data sync provider. You should not be creating those manually. New vendor packs are included whenever you sync over new cartons, so that's a plus because then you don't have to manually create those new vendor packs. If you're creating new cartons manually, then you also have to create those vendor packs manually. It can become a pretty long and tedious process if you're having to do it one by one. So unfortunately, for sorted cartons, mixed cartons, and pallet cartons, you cannot sync those over, and they do have to be built manually in IMA along with the corresponding vendor pack. Now, I am going to do a demo, and I know I had just stated that if you do like each cartons and exploding assortment cartons, you should be syncing those over. But there may be some of you that, even though you may be new to the role, perhaps your company has been with us for a really long time and you've just never transitioned over to using data sync. Or you may encounter the instance where maybe there's an issue with your data sync provider and they're having trouble getting items synced over to the retailers, and you really have to get an item set up fast, and you do have to create it manually. That would be kind of an exception to the rule, but I did still want to walk through how to do that because it's a bit more involved than just using the new item grid setup. So I am going to show you how to manually create a new uniform carton and a new exploding assortment carton. So first we are going to do a uniform carton. So we're adding a uniform carton to an existing item. So I'm going to grab the KSN here that I'm adding that uniform carton to, and I'm going to do a quick search for that KSN. Here we can see it's operational. I'm going to go to the Packages tab, and up at the top you can see Add Package. UCRT is Uniform Carton. It's the one that's selected by default. So I'm going to leave that as is, and I'm going to click Add Package. So right now, this current KSN only has an each. You can see there's the retail marking number. That's the UPC, the 12-digit number. And we're wanting to add a uniform carton. So I'm going to click Add Package to add a uniform carton. First thing we have to do is enter our shipping marking number. So I'm going to grab that here. And there's my shipping marking number. It usually will already have the division selected for you. Then you have to select the vendor information. And you will probably have a drop-down for this field. Since I'm a super user, I have to actually search. Just make sure that you do select one with ORD and not PAY. If you select you're going to run into some issues down the road when you're trying to select additional fields. So you have to be sure to select an order done. It does automatically match the category to the existing KSN, and then you just have to select the subcategory. And then click Add Package. So here you can see it's a new uniform carton, and package type is uniform carton right there. You can see it. First thing you want to do is enter your description. And then if we go further down under members, right now you won't see anything under members because nothing has been added. So you want to use this drop down and select that each and click Add. Then you want to go ahead and enter the quantity for your uniform carton. So remember from day one, a uniform carton is multiple eaches within a single carton. So we're going to get, I'm entering 10, and so we're going to get 10 of these 5-pocket jeans in size 14.5. I did want to take a couple of minutes to talk about eaches per inner, and number of inners. I talk about these on day one usually. I have a couple of PowerPoint slides. Okay. So inners and eaches. Inners are internal cartons within a carton, and they may be broken down at the DC, and then those inners shipped to different stores. So in this depiction, you can see we have our big carton here, and then we have 3 inners. And within each of those inners, there are 6 eaches, these Tylenol PMs. So for our total eaches per inner, number of inners, we have 18 total eaches. We have 18 boxes of Tylenol. Then there are 6 boxes of Tylenol per each inner. And then there are 3 inners. So in IMA, right here, that would show up as 18, 6, 3. Now in this example, we're not really using any inners, and we're just putting all of the boxes of Tylenol into that big carton. So in that case, our total eaches is 18. And then each of these eaches are now counted as an inner. So eaches per inner is 1, and the total number of inners is 18. So if you only had, let's say, 6 boxes of Tylenol, then it would be 6, 1, 6. So in this example, we have these jeans, and the total number of inners, we're not really going to have inners, we're just going to have all of the jeans in the box. So we're going to say that we have 10 eaches, so that's 10 inners. And if we click Save, you'll see that these numbers update. So now total eaches is listed as 10. Eaches per inner is listed as 1. Let's say we are going to have inners in that carton. If we enter that we're going to have 2 inners and then click Save, you'll see it updates again. Now your eaches per inner is showing as 5. So there's 5 jeans in each inner. You have to make sure that this is divisible properly by the total quantity. If you try to put 3 inners, save it, it's not going to come across correctly because it's going to show 3 eaches per inner and 3 inners. That only multiplies out to 9, even though there's a 10 quantity in the box. So whenever you go to approve this through workflow, you're actually going to encounter an error. So make sure that these are divisible properly. So I'm going to change this back to 10 because we're not going to have any inners for this carton setup. Next, you have to enter your depth, width, and height. I calculated these ahead of time, but you have to make sure that it makes sense for your cube sum value with the number of eaches that are in your carton. So once you've entered those, go ahead and click Save. And then if we go to Workflow, we're going to check for errors. Now you'll see 2 errors here. The first one says at least one dimension is empty. And then the second one says that a vendor pack must be created for this package. So for the first one, if we go back to the Packages tab, we're going to go to our uniform carton. We know that this one is our uniform carton, and it's the one that's in process, because on the left side, you can still select this box under Action, and you could actually remove it if you wanted to. So we know that this one is the in-process carton, whereas this one's static. It can't be changed right now because it's operational. So we're going to click into the hyperlink of that in-process carton to get back to our uniform carton. And if you scroll down here, we'll see, oh, I forgot the weight. So again, you want to make sure that your weight for your carton makes sense according to the eaches that are going into that uniform carton. Now that second error we got because we did not have a vendor pack for this. So anytime you're adding a new carton, you have to have a corresponding vendor pack. And we will come back to that in a few slides to add a vendor pack once we get through that section. So right now I showed you how to do a uniform carton. So next I'm going to show you how to add a new exploding assortment. So to create a new exploding assortment, you have to hover over Create and then choose Exploding Assortment. And it's going to load a new page for you. And you want to first enter that shipping marking number here. And then you can select your division, your vendor name, your vendor information, and then select your SHC category. And finally, your subcategory. And then you're going to click Add Package. So you're going to come to the Refine Package Type screen. If you were creating a pallet, this is where you would select that, but we're going to create an exploding assortment. So we're going to stick with carton. And then you're going to click Create Package. So first thing you need to do is enter a description. And you do not need to enter the brand because it's a carton. You don't have to enter brand for a carton. You only have to enter it for eaches. So we're going to leave that blank. You do have to select whether there's an EAS tag. So we're going to choose no for both of those and click Save. And that brings us to the Exploding Assortment Package page. So we can see that our description populated from what we had entered, as well as our shipping marking number. There is nothing listed under the members section. So we're going to search for assorted members. And I'm actually going to search for it by individual KSNs, just because since I'm in the QA environment, it runs a little slow, and it'll find those faster for me by entering the KSN number. But you could also search for it by vendor stock number, marking number, or KSN description. So you don't have to search for them individually by each KSN. That's just what I'm doing since I'm in the QA environment. So you select it and you click Add Members, and I'm going to add one more to that. And so now you will see that we've added 3 KSNs to this exploding assortment carton. So next we need to update the quantity. We're going to say that we're going to have 3 of each scarf in this exploding assortment carton. Okay? And you also have to put your height, depth, and width for the carton, as well as your weight. And then you can click Save. Okay, and again, if we go to the Workflow tab and check for errors, the only error we're going to get is that it's missing a vendor pack. So that's good. Everything on that carton is as it should be. We didn't miss anything. So we just need to add that vendor pack. Okay, so any questions about adding cartons? Does somebody have a question?
Yeah, actually, sorry. I have a question. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Oh, okay. I was just wondering, when it's an exploding assortment, or I'm not sure if you're going to go over that yet, if it's an exploding assortment, do I need to first change the assortment if I need to change, for example, the carton dimensions or the weight, or do I need to do the eaches individually first before doing the assortment?
So are you talking about creating a new exploding assortment?
No, just updating, making a change.
Updating an existing one? Okay. You cannot update the existing configuration for an existing exploding assortment. Are you just trying to update the dimensions?
Yes.
Okay. We are going to be talking about dimensions in a little bit.
Okay.
So yeah, we'll wait a few slides, and we will be talking. I think that's the last topic for the day.
Oh, okay. Okay.
We'll see if we answer your question, and if not, please speak up, and we'll talk about it some more, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yep, not a problem. Does anybody else have any questions about new cartons? Okay. If no one else has any questions about new cartons, we're going to move on to new vendor packs. So my merchant or inventory analyst has requested that I create a new vendor pack for an existing item. Why would I need to create a new vendor pack? So this would be for items that they're already operational. Maybe they've already been, you've been having orders on those items for a while, and suddenly they're asking for a new vendor pack. There are several reasons why they might want a new vendor pack. Could be that they'd like a new flow type if you've been shipping your items through DC, and they'd like one set up for DSC or any of our other flow types, then you would need a new vendor pack. You cannot change flow types on existing vendor packs. Another reason could be an additional store format. So if your item's been sold in Kmart and they want to start selling it in Sears, it would need a new vendor pack for Sears. Also, maybe there's a different vendor. A couple of scenarios where this is possible would be that a vendor has been supplying a product, and now vendor A is no longer going to supply that product, but vendor B is going to come in and start supplying that same exact product. So that vendor would need their own vendor pack. Another example would be the big packages of water bottles, like the plastic ones that you can throw away or recycle. I know we cannot get all of our supply from a single vendor for those water bottles. So we actually get that supplied from several vendors. So each of those vendors that are supplying that same exact item have to have their own vendor pack set up for it. Another reason why you might need new vendor packs, and we kind of touched on this, if there is a change in carton configurations and or a new each or member. Those would require new vendor packs. And finally, if you have more than one cost. So typically, all the vendor packs for an item has to have the same cost. You will usually get an error in IMA if you try to set it up with different costs. However, there are scenarios where you can have different costs in IMA for a single item. Examples for this would be offshore items. If you've been shipping something domestically, go to the 48 continental states, and now we want to start selling that item in Puerto Rico or Hawaii, that's going to cost more, so that cost is going to go up, and so we would need a different vendor pack for that different cost. So the most common error is when adding a new vendor pack, the desired ship point isn't available to select. It's not in that drop-down. The DUNS number is not set up for the correct format, or it's not set up for the correct flow. So if that's the case, if it's not set up for the correct format or flow, you can reach out to VendMain at SearsHC.com, and they will help you get started in getting those added to your DUNS. So the process for adding new vendor packs depends on whether you use data sync or you set items up manually. If you use data sync, new vendor packs should be synced over with the existing UPC. Now if it's a new carton, so if it's a new UPC, it'll automatically sync over a vendor pack with that new UPC. And if it's an existing UPC, just sync it over with the existing UPC. If you set items up manually, you have to add or duplicate a vendor pack from the vendor pack tab in IMA. And going back to IMA now, I'm going to walk through how to do that. So we created this exploding assortment, and the error that we got was that it needed a vendor pack. So now we're going to go to the vendor pack tab, and we are going to click the Add Vendor Pack button. So this gives you a blank slate, just a blank page for the Edit Vendor Pack page. So first thing we're going to do is we're going to select that excess carton right here. Then we're going to select our dones. Again, you should have a drop-down. I just have to enter the order done since I'm a super user. So give me 1 second to search for that. And after you've selected that, you can select your flow type. So I'm going to select DC. And then my primary store format. I'm going to select Kmart. If we go further down the page, you'll see a place for your vendor stock number, the order quantity multiple, and your order quantity unit of measure. So any of the fields that have the red asterisk are going to be required. If you leave those blank, you will get an error when you try to approve it. Over on the right side of the screen, you're going to see your projected first in-store date. So that's just the date that you expect your product to be in the store. And it's more for informational purposes and for prioritization, so don't get hung up on getting that date exactly correct. Just pick the date that makes sense to when your product's supposed to be in the store, and that'll be fine. So if we scroll further down the page, first I want to point out this section here, this tier group section. The tier group is defaulted based on the division and the flow type that is selected for your item. Here we can see the RSC tier group is exploded out. If we explode one of these out, you'll see that this is not selected because that tier group is not selected. So we can just ignore those. We only have to focus on the ones that is exploded out. So we can see that this item is going to be going to 2 different distribution centers. It's going to be going to a location in Mira Loma, California, and Chambersburg, Pennsylvania. And if we go back up to this tier group section, we can see where we can update it for all of the tier groups. Some of these tier groups have maybe 6 different DC locations, and instead of selecting your ship point for every single one and entering the cost for every single one individually, we can do that up here. Normally this is not already selected if you have more than 1 ship point. This specific setup, there's only 1 ship point available, so it did select it. But if you have more than 1, it's going to be blank. So if we go up to the tier group section, you can select your ship point. You can also enter your vendor cost. The cost for your carton. So if you're able to, I do hear some background noise. If you could please mute your microphones when you're not speaking, that would be great to cut out that background noise. We'd appreciate it. So once you've entered that information, go ahead and click Apply to All. It's going to come up with a confirmation message, and you can click OK. So now if you scroll back down, you will see that that has been populated for all of your DC locations. One of of the things I want to point out, if you try to go straight to another tab, you're going to come up with this message right here. Normally, when you try to exit an application like Excel or Word and you forget to save it, it comes up with a confirmation message asking if you want to save your file. And you click OK, because that's how most applications work. This one's kind of backwards. So this is, you made changes to this form. Do you want to continue without saving? So if you were to just click OK by default, you would actually just lose all of the changes that you made. So make sure if you get this that you click Cancel and then you click Save. I don't want you to lose all of the work that you did. All right, so now that all that information has been completed, if you go to the Workflow tab, you can check for errors. And here you can see there's a warning. I know up here it says, so you always have to scroll down and see what they are. And if it actually says warning under type, you can ignore that. Warnings do not have to be resolved. You only have to resolve this if it says error in red. So that means that vendor pack is good. So that's how you would add a vendor pack. You can also duplicate a vendor pack. The process is a little bit different, but it can make it a bit faster if you duplicate it versus just adding it from scratch. So I'm going to enter in an existing KSN. I'm going to go to the vendor pack tab. And this time, I'm going to actually go into an existing vendor pack by clicking that vendor pack number hyperlink. And then up at the very top right of the screen, you will see a duplicate vendor pack button. So I'd like for you to click that when you want to duplicate a vendor pack. And then this is the screen that you're going to get. This is really beneficial if you need to create multiple new vendor packs. Maybe you need to do one for both the Sears store and you need to do one for DSD. So you could do that all on this page. So you would first select your store format, and then your vendor information, your flow type. I'm going to select DSD for this one, and your primary store format. And if you scroll further over to the right, select your package. Usually there's just one option here. Sometimes there's a couple if you have like a uniform carton on a single item. So I'm just going to select that one. And so if you had more than one, like let's say you wanted to do a Sears one as well, you could go ahead and do another line for your new Sears vendor pack. But we're just going to do the one DSD. And then click Create Duplicates. And this time, when it loads the vendor pack page, you just see this new vendor pack you created. You do have to still click into that vendor pack number hyperlink here, because there's a few additional fields you have to complete. But you will notice that it did automatically copy this information over. So it copied over the shipping package number, well, we had selected it on that previous screen. And you don't have to fill out as much information as you did otherwise. One of the things you will want to update is your projected first in-store date, because this one is dated 2010. If it's more than 3 months in the past, you will get an error. So we're going to update that projected first in-store date. And then you also have to answer your California Prop 65 questions. So we're going to choose no. But it did fill out this information for you. It copied it over. It copied over the cost, the vendor stock number, the description, the order quantity multiple, and the unit of measure. It copied all that information over. Now, because this is a DSD vendor pack that's direct to store, there are no tier groups. So since there are no tier groups, you do not have to select ship points down here. So this is all we have to do for this vendor pack. So then you would just click Save, and you go to Workflow and Approve. So any questions about adding and duplicating vendor packs? Okay, we'll move on to new ship points then. So there are several reasons for ship point changes. It could be that your shipping location has closed, or maybe you would like to adjust the route for a better deal. For example, with that, you might have different ship points for different DCs. You may have a warehouse in New Jersey and California, and if you are shipping to our DCs in Pennsylvania and California, you'd want to pick up from the New Jersey location for our Pennsylvania DC, and from your California location for our California DC, versus shipping it across the country. The most common errors when changing a ship point is selecting the wrong one. If you do select the wrong one, then we're going to show up at your warehouse in, let's say, New Jersey, and you're not going to have the product there because that product is at a different warehouse. So you want to make sure that you do select the correct ship point. Another common error is that the desired ship point is not available. It's not displaying in that drop-down. So if it's not available, you can submit a request through the vendor portal to have that added to your DUNS. On the vendor portal, if you're on the IMA tab and you look down the page under ship point changes, you can click here, is what it says, to add, change, or remove ship points. And that'll bring you to a form. And then you can complete this form and press submit and make a request to have that added to your DUNS. Be aware that it is not automatically added. It's not instantaneous. It will take a few days, and they will email you to let you know once it has been completed. So I'm going to skip over these slides and go straight to the demo so that I can show you the ship point demo. But you have those slides as your reference if you would like to review those on how to update ship points. It goes into it in those slides. But I'd rather show you the demo and spend time on that. So the first thing you want to do, we're changing this for operational. So I'm going to enter that KSN that I want to change it for. And your ship points are located on your vendor pack tab. So once you've done a quick search for your item, you will want to click the vendor pack tab, and you'll want to click into the hyperlinked vendor pack. Then if you scroll down the page, above the tier group section, you will see change DC locations. So you want to select the box to the left of change DC locations and click create change request. That's going to load a new page, and here you can see the information. If you're just changing a single ship point, like for all of the DCs, you can do that here, and then click Apply to All. It'll come up with a confirmation message, and you can click OK. Now, if you want to do different ship points for different DC locations, you need to explode out this tier group by pressing the plus sign. And then if you scroll down, you can see this is your old value or the current value, and this is what you want the new value to be. And these are the DC locations. So we have for our California location, I'm wanting to ship it from my California warehouse. And then this is Pennsylvania location. Let's say I'm actually wanting to do it from the Bayonne, New Jersey warehouse. So now it's going to go to specific warehouses for different DC locations. Then if you click Save and go to Next, it's going to take you to the Workflow tab, and that's where you can check for errors, and you can approve that through. See, all I got was the warning. You can ignore warnings, so you would just click Approve and submit Ignore Warnings. So any questions about updating ship points? Okay, then we're going to go ahead and talk about dimensions and weights then. So there's several reasons why you might want to change dimensions and weights. It could be that items are so old that they're wrong, or it could be that you added a new carton with the correct dimensions and weights, but the eaches are now wrong because they were incorrect to begin with. So we only implemented dimensions and weights rules a few years ago. So if you have items in our system that are, let's say they're maybe 7 or 8 years old, they may have been put into our system before we had those rules in place. So they may not make sense with the carton and the eaches. They may not add up correctly, and if you tried to put them through like that now, you would have gotten an error. So that's what we mean by items are so old that they're wrong. The most common errors when changing dimensions and weights are creating the change but forgetting to approve them through the vendor role, and that's really true for any change request, or calculating the cube incorrectly. So the process for updating dimensions and weights depends on the type of package or the type of carton that you're trying to update it for. If you're wanting to update it for each packages, each cartons, uniform cartons, and exploding assortment cartons, you should sync those new dimensions and weights over from your data sync provider. If you would like to update it for assorted cartons, mixed cartons, or pallet cartons, those cannot be synced over and they have to be updated manually. I also want to talk a little bit about exemption rules, the dimension exception indicator. So there are some instances such as, let's say if you're stacking product like chairs, or if you have, let's say pillows, if you're putting a bunch of pillows in a box, they're going to get compressed. For instances like that, we have the dimension exception indicator, because that means that the carton and the value for the eaches won't necessarily add up to make logical sense because they can be nested or they can be compressed. So to update the dimension exception indicator on operational items, you would change it on the Packages tab for a single item. If you want to do it for multiple items at the same time, I would recommend using the Changes grid. And keep in mind, you don't have to do that flag for cartons. You only have to do it at the each level. If you're doing it for an individual package or an individual item, you would go to the Package tab after doing a quick search for the item, and scroll down and you can select the box next to Dimension Exception Indicator and click Create Change Request. Now this would be the same thing if you're also wanting to update the dimensions and weights. These fields are grouped together, so when it brings it into the change request, you will actually see all of those fields. So if you're just doing the dimension exception indicator, you would select it from the drop-down. If you did need to update those dimensions and weights, you would do them on this page as well. And then you would click Save and go to Next. And then don't forget to actually approve it through workflow, because if you stop here, your item's going to get stuck until you approve it. If you're doing it through the grid, you can only update the dimension exception indicator on the grid. You can't update the dimensions or the weights. So to do the dimension exception indicator, you would just select that in section 1. You can copy and paste your KSNs or your G10s or your core div item numbers, and then click Create Grid. It'll bring that into your default mode. Here you can just select that in the green highlighted section and click Approve, and if there's any errors, resolve the errors. But again, you'll see here for height, and if you'd scrolled over, you would see the depth and width as well. They're actually grayed out because you cannot update dimensions on the Changes grid. You can only change that dimension exception indicator. And if you're trying to resolve a conflict between eaches and your cartons, then you would not be able to get your carton to go through until you update your eaches. And if you have multiple cartons that are already connected to those eaches, you may find it a bit tricky. I'm not sure if you'd immediately run into errors with that, But if you're running into too many errors, I would reach out to the help desk, and they could probably assist you. But you should start with updating your eaches and make sure that your eaches are correct, and then you could update your cartons accordingly. I know we had a question earlier in the session about that. So does that answer your question for that one?
Yes.
Okay. Yeah, and if you're having just a ton of trouble, you can reach out to the help desk. Sometimes getting those corrected can be kind of a pain. And we can't tell you what your dimensions and stuff should be because you actually have the boxes. But if you're running into lots of errors, we can try to help you figure out how to fix those. So does anybody else have any questions on dimensions and weights? Okay, with some key points to take away from today. If a carton configuration is incorrect, you must create a new carton with the correct configuration. You can't update that existing carton. A new carton also always requires the vendor pack, but a new vendor pack does not necessarily require a new carton. It's best practice to sync over new cartons and vendor packs rather than creating them manually, although sometimes it is required. Before fixing an incorrect UPC, communicate with your buyer to determine whether the same KSN is required. And then you must wait until an item is operational before you can select different ship points for different DCs. I'm not sure if I explained that thoroughly. I know I mentioned it the other day. But if you do want to do different ship points for different DCs, you can't do that during the new item setup. You can only select one single ship point for all of the DCs. And then after it becomes operational, you would go back and you would do a change request to do different ship points for different DCs. So I will be sending out a survey link later today, and I would really love to get your feedback, whether you love it or hate it. What do you think we're doing right? What can we improve? What other topics are you looking for? I'll be sending this out later today with the video link. And do you have any other questions at all while I still have everybody on the line?
I actually have one more question.
Okay.
If I have multiple items, is it recommended that I do one grid per item, or is it better to do them all together on one grid? I know
are they all located in the same division and category?
Yes.
And they all have the same flow type?
Yes.
Do you know if they all have the same flow type?
Yes.
They do? Okay. You can do them on a single grid. You can do up to 50 items on a grid, and you may find that faster. However, are you brand new to the grid, or have you been using it for a while?
I'm new to it.
New to it? I would recommend starting off with a smaller amount. Are you just working with eaches, or are you working with an exploding assortments?
Exploding assortments.
Okay. I would start off doing one exploding assortment at a time, just until you get comfortable working on the grid.
Okay.
And as you get comfortable, you can start, doing more at a single time. It'll be more efficient that way. But if you aren't yet familiar with it, I would try to work with a smaller number starting out.
Now, does that create more work for the merchant at all, or is it the same?
No, it's the same amount of work for the merchant.
Okay. Okay.
So,
I just wanted to make sure.
yeah, no, it comes through the same for them. So.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you so much.
Not a problem. Anybody else have any questions?
Yes, hi. My name is Sandra Wolf. I think in the second session you mentioned that you would be able to or request a copy of everything that we've discussed.
Yes. Are you talking about for the maintenance and IMA changes?
Yes, correct. Sorry.
Okay. Give me 1 second. That's a good call. I forgot to show you that. Let me bring up Chrome. And I have to share it, so give me 1 second to share. Okay, so on the vendor portal, if you go to the IMA tab, it's still logging me in, so we'll give it a second. There we go. All right, so if you go to IMA, you can go to Training and Guides, or you can go to Vendor University IMA Online Training. It takes you to the same page. And if you scroll down the screen, here you see IMA Guides and Documentation. We have under several things under Quick Steps. We have Add a Vendor Pack, Change a Ship Point, Cost Changes in IMA, Dimensions and Weights Guidelines, Vendor Pack Setup for Offshore Items. And then there's some like creating the uniform carton and exploding assortment carton. Those are just in the PowerPoint.
Okay. Perfect. Thank you.
Not a problem. I'm glad you asked about that so I could show everybody. Does anybody have any other questions? Okay. Well, if you do think of any more questions, please feel free to email vendoruniversity@searshc.com. If you're working on item setup and you're having trouble as you're going through item setup, it would be better for you to email IMAhelp@searshc.com. They can help you walk through that process if you're still having trouble. But you will have the videos that you can also go back and watch for the new item setup to see that in action as well. But otherwise, have a great day. I'll be sending out the video link and the survey later today, and I hope you all have a great weekend.